So again, welcome everyone to our presentation today. The discussion is about turning your lawn into garden. And our presenter is Casey, as she is with the Urban Soil Health Program. She'll talk a little bit more about that when she introduces herself. But I will just start by saying we are one of the host organizations for today, Women for the Land. I am the state coordinator. We work with a variety of federal, state, and local conservation agencies to empower women to make good land choices, good conservation choices for their property, their farm. And we have a co-host today as well, and that is Purdue University's Women in Ag group, Women in Agriculture. I'm on that team. We have a few team members on with us today as well, but this team is committed to providing educational opportunities and resources for women in the ag community. The website is here, and both our group, Women for the Land, and the Purdue Women in Ag group are on Facebook. So we hope you'll visit our websites and join us on Facebook.
My name's Casey Kennett, and I am part of the Urban Soil Health Program. I am an urban soil health specialist in the southeast part of the state. Our program is a contribution agreement between the Indiana Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, as well as the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So our program is combined of both of those, and we help the whole state. So what we're here today, from grass to garden, let's just jump right into our objectives for today. We're going to talk about soil health, our soil health principles. We're going to touch on soil testing, then get into grass to garden strategies, and then talk about some maintenance afterwards with reduced till, no till, mulching, and cover crops. This is a picture of Kevin Allison's garden in Indianapolis. It's at the Mayor's Garden located near Eagle Creek. Kevin is an urban conservationist for the Marion County SWCD. So we'll talk about some of these practices that he is doing and how to incorporate those into your garden. Examples we can see here is the black tarp. He's also got some mulching with some plant residue back there, and also some cover crops. So what is soil health? We define soil health as the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So continued capacity, we want that soil to function at the maximum amount. And by function, we mean having a healthy, productive soil that's able to grow our food in. And we also want the soil to have life. It's a living thing as well. So if the soil is alive, then it's alive with plants, insects, and other organisms that will help nourish and support life in the soil. So a soil that will function will have the ability to infiltrate, store, and filter water. It will also have good physical structure. It will hold together well, meaning it won't break apart easily or get blown away by the wind or erosion from rainwater. And it will also be able to cycle nutrients and provide a habitat for soil life, such as those earthworms, pollinators, and beetles. Here are a couple examples of a healthy soil and one that's not so much. The one on the right is an aerated and porous soil that will allow water and nutrients to move easily through, as well as any biodiversity such as earthworms and beetles to move throughout the soil as well. The picture on the right has a lot more richness to it. A rich dark color will indicate that there's more organic matter as well. So we can see the difference between those two pictures. Then here we have our 4 soil health principles that we follow. This wheel was recently created by NRCS and Soil IASWCD and other partners to capture the spirit of urban soil health. So we want everyone to know that we think soil health is for everyone, not just big farmers, even the small backyard gardens that we're trying to establish as well. So minimizing soil disturbance and maximizing our soil cover will protect the soil. Maximizing continuous living roots and maximizing our diversity as much as possible will feed the soil. So when we protect the soil, there will be less erosion, less soil loss, better water retention. The soil will hold together better. And with continuous living roots and diversity, the soil will be able to have better nutrient efficiency. There'll be more insect diversity and more organic matter created. So now we'll touch on soil testing. We want to talk about soil testing first because it's just a good place to start. Here we can talk about what our goals are. We can also ask questions such as, what was the prior land use before we want to grow food here? Could there possibly have been a building or a business on site? Could it have been used as a park before? Another thing to think about is animal waste contamination. Are animals allowed to roam freely in the area? Could it have also been a previous dumping site just full of junk? So soil testing, we can answer some of these questions and determine if there's any nutrient deficiencies. We can also determine the pH, maintain the pH if it's at a good place. And like I said, it's also a good starting point if it's never been done before. So some considerations when we soil test. You should soil test annually or up to once every 3 years, depending on how healthy the soil is. So if you've achieved the results that you were looking for, maintaining those good soil tests, you could soil test every 2 to 3 years. Sometimes the cost of soil tests can get pricey, depending on how many samples you send to the lab. So that could also be taken into consideration. You do want to be consistent when you soil test. Do it at the same time every year. So if you start in the spring, you should do it at the same time next spring. You also want to gather samples and collect those from similar beds or areas. Being consistent with the lab that you send samples to is also a good way to compare your results from year to year. So using the same lab and comparing those results will allow you the most accurate result comparison. If you need assistance with soil sampling, you could reach out to your local SWCD, or Purdue Extension is a good place to start. We're also forming soil health working groups in all the areas of the state. So there might be a group that's near you that could also come out and provide assistance as well. So please reach out if you need help with soil testing. So now, why we're here, grass to garden, how to start. So our starting point would be a grass covered spot. From there, we would want to tarp. If the grass is extremely tall, you could mow down so it's easier to put the tarp over. Step 2, we tarp. Depending on when you start, could depend on how long you actually keep the area covered. One option would be starting in the fall. You could tarp in the fall and through the winter and then be ready for spring. So it'd have a lot of time to sit. Or if you decided maybe this January you wanted to start a garden, there's still time. You could tarp now for at least 4 weeks. 4 weeks is the minimum that I would say to keep the ground tarp. The longer you tarp it, the more decomposition there will be. But at least 4 weeks is a good place to start. Here in the picture, you can see this would be about halfway through a tarping period of what what it looks like underneath. Step 3, then we should have somewhat bare soil, more decomposed material once you take the tarp off. That material will turn into organic matter and then just go back into the soil as nutrients. Then I added in a step 3.5 because I think it could possibly be an optional step of adding compost or amendments if needed, and then you would rake those in once you took the tarp off. You may decide that you don't need to add any extra compost. So that could be just an option. Keep in mind though that you are going to be slightly disturbing the soil here, but it's for a good reason to incorporate organic matter. But by doing so, there's also a chance that you could rake up some more weed seeds. So we do have to take that into consideration as well. So once we've got our tarp off and then we've added some material, rake that in, then we're ready for some landscape fabric or plastic to put down. That will just help with more weed suppression. You can plant your plants directly into that. You can cut holes into the fabric and then put your transplants directly in. So I would suggest using transplants just because they are established before you would get them into the ground for better results, especially if it's your first year trying to establish. So we've got the landscape fabric down, we've got our plants in, and then step 6 would be maintaining your garden with mulch, permanent beds and walkways, using cover crops, different crop rotation, and also using reduce or no-till practices. So here we are, kinds of tarps. While tilling is a quick and relatively easy way to prepare the garden for planting, it also destroys the soil structure and will disrupt beneficial organisms, increase your erosion, and bring weed seeds to the surface. So no-till practices such as tarping will nurture the soil and help the natural systems for healthier plants. So here we've got a black tarp. Black tarp will cause occultation, which means just complete darkness. So the plants are completely covered and receiving no light. They have to have light to grow, so that stops it. You could also use a clear plastic or a white and blue tarp. Those will just create more of a solarization, just heating up the soil so that the weeds can grow and germinate, but then die off because of the heat. Temperature is so hot. You should double layer a clear plastic or a white tarp just so it could be more effective. But if you don't have that, that's totally fine too. Tarping can actually cut down the amount of walking passes over the land, so that would reduce your compaction. And it can also, like I said, reduce the need for tilling, and that'll take us back to those 4 soil health principles of providing less disturbance for the land. The tarps will trap in heat and moisture, encouraging the weed seeds to germinate, draw up earthworms and other soil organisms towards the surface, and then also blocking out that sunlight so the newly sprouted weeds will wither and die. Occultation in gardening won't actually eliminate all your weeds in a single growing season, but if you use it consistently over the years, it should greatly diminish the amount of weeds in your garden. At 140 degrees, it would be too hot for any microbial activity, and tarping will smother the weeds and any potential pathogens as well. I do want to emphasize, all of this work up front. It seems like it is a lot of work and a lot of time would be put into this, but if you put in the time and labor now to get your garden started, you should have less issues in the future, like less weed problems, erosion problems, and things like that. So putting in the effort now is only going to benefit you later. Here we've got some pictures. This is Kevin's garden back at Eagle Creek, or by Eagle Creek. So you can see here, he's actually got his daughter helping him. But once the grass is gone and we've tarped the bare soil to work with, now we're ready to lay some landscape fabric and add any plants and other amendments if needed. You'll notice that there's plastic on the walkways as well to keep the weeds down. Having permanent walkways and having permanent garden beds can also reduce the amount of compaction in your garden. So you're just, going over those same pathways and staying out of the garden beds will benefit your soil health. Here we have another way to tarp and cover and block the sunlight. We've got the ground tarped and then piled on some previous cover crop to add more weight and to block out the sunlight. On the left side, we can see that the previous crop was cut down low and then going to probably be tarped. That tarp will probably be flipped over, so it's covering the previous crop. And then the picture on the right, you can see where that tarp has been uncovered and what the ground looks like, ready to be planted into. So this tarp was actually able to be moved back and forth in between the beds. So one was being used and the other one was being tarped, and then vice versa. Here you can see where the landscape fabric, actually more of plastic, was put down and covered with mulching materials. Then the holes are cut to be able to plant directly into. This will help with your weed suppression, water retention, and your soil moisture, and will also maintain a cooler soil temperature. The picture on the right, you can see where that previous fabric had been laid down, mulching had been put on top, and keeping that weed suppression down. Here we have a slightly disturbed bed to incorporate any organic material left, preparing the bed for planting directly into. So once the plants are in the ground, you should be able to add more mulch around the plants, and this will protect the soil and help with any new weeds that may pop up from the soil being disturbed. I will mention that the first 2 inches of the soil will hold weed seeds that could be dormant for many years. So every time that the soil is tilled, there is a chance that weed seeds from maybe 5-6 years ago could come to the surface and could potentially sprout. So reducing that tillage will help keep those underground and unable to grow. So here we have the NRCS codes for reduced till and no-till. The purpose of reduced tillage or no-till is to limit the amount of disturbance to the soil. So no-till practices can reduce erosion, maintain or increase the soil quality and organic matter content, will increase plant available moisture and nutrients, as well as provide food and cover for wildlife. Reducing tillage will also limit the number of times that you go across the soil, helping with any compaction issues. Here we've got some different tools that can be used to help with compaction and reduce tillage. Examples, we've got stirrup hoes, tillers, and one-row seeders. So you're just limiting that amount of going across the soil over time. Broad forking. This is a broad fork, and it can be done actually once the tarp comes off. So that way you can aerate the soil and then incorporate any of that organic matter into the soil as well. And also helping with compaction at the same time. Here we've got a slight disturbance of the soil used with the rake. You can also notice that these could be permanent beds with permanent walkways to limit the amount of compaction. The walkways, they look like they've been used over and over. So that keeps the compaction out of the garden bed and just in the walkway. Here we've got a Warren hoe, which would be effective for digging like narrow furrows or tight spaces for planting bulbs and seeds. So once you've got that disturbed, slightly raked soil, then you could use the Warren hoe to furrow out a row to plant seeds directly into. So now we'll talk about mulching. I've mentioned it a couple times, but the biggest uses of mulching are to suppress weeds and reduce erosion, also retaining soil moisture and keeping that temperature down. So straw, hay, wood chips, newspaper, cardboard, those could all be different types of mulches that could be used. I will say you do want to make sure to know where you're getting your materials from. So if you're getting straw or hay from a local farmer, you could ask them what's in their pastures, what do they have in their mix, because you don't want to bring in any more weed seeds from a bale of hay or straw that you got, especially when we're trying to keep the weeds out. So take that into consideration where you're getting your sources from. Here's another picture of Kevin's garden. So you can see the straw is way mulched up around those plants. Definitely going to help with the weed suppression and allow those plants to grow and get the most nutrients available to them. Here you can see there's some wood chips added as mulch. Over time, these layers of material will build up and kind of create a fluffy, workable soil filled with organic matter. Just using the straw, wood chips, and things like that create those layers. And then over time, it just develops into a good, healthy soil. Here's some more examples of mulch, straw, hay. And like I said, keep in mind where you're getting your materials from. Here's another picture of how you can see the mulch is really built up around the plants. There's no soil left uncovered, nothing exposed for any erosion possibilities or any new weeds to emerge. Some more mulching up. I shared this picture earlier, but the one on the right, you can see that the plastic was laid down completely before the mulch was brought in on top. And then the plants were planted directly into the already mulched area. So you could do it that way as well. Here in the top left picture, you can see where a cover crop was cut down and placed on top of the bed. So this is almost acting like a tarp itself, but that plant material will eventually break down into the bed and more crops will be able to be planted directly into it. You can also see where straw was included in the walkways to help keep the weeds down. So that's something that you could do. And more mulching. So you can see how that really helps the plants and is beneficial for that area. And it just looks nice as well. Here you can see that some grass has started to come through the straw. Maybe a few little weeds have come in here and there. But just imagine what it would have looked like had there been no mulching done at all. This helps on your time and labor, so you don't have to be out weeding your garden all the time. So putting the straw down will help you in that way as well. There definitely would have been a lot more weed pressure here had there not been any mulch put down. So let's talk about cover crops really quickly. Here you can do like a light incorporation to help ensure that the seed and soil makes contact and that there's good moisture, and then also to protect from any birds or rodents or anything that might come by, lightly disturbing the soil to incorporate that seed will give it the best chance to grow. So here the soil's been raked, and then the seed just scattered on top, slightly raked again to incorporate that. And then it should be watered as well to get that moisture. Here you can see some cover crop growth with some straw over the top to hold the seed in place and to also help with erosion while that cover crop's growing up. Just growing up through the straw, and then that straw will end up decomposing and reusing itself. So everything just kind of recycles into itself. Here's some more cover crop that's been chopped and cut down, probably used for mulching. There's some vetch, looks like crimson clover in there as well. So your cover crops can be used as a dual purpose, not just to grow and look pretty, but then you can use them for mulch and other things, increasing your organic matter. So cover crops are a great way to help that soil health as well. Here we've got some examples of some roots of the cover crops. So you can see how those roots just really get into the soil, hold that soil together. Those dark, rich soils that look like they're filled with organic matter, helping with compaction as well, and keeping that water retention and the nutrients there and available for the plants. So this is a list of resources that I use that is also available to you as well. We have a box link that you can go there and download for more resources and handouts and things like that. You can also check out our website. Here I've got a list of more resources available for you as well. And then these are books that we actually have for our local working groups that we provide to them to use as resources. But these are also things that I use myself. You could purchase these individually for yourself. I took a lot of the presentation out of some of these books. So they're really good tools if you can get your hands on those. But there's a list of those. And then also for us, for our urban soil health program, here's our a link where you can subscribe to learn more about events, field days, workshops, and things that we're doing, as well as a link for resources for yourself, PDFs, information, and things like that are available there. So thank you. That is all I had for my presentation.